Okay, so we're going to make a surgical style face mask using the kit provided by Roper Corporation. The mask will look in the style as this green one, where it has 2 pleats creating 3 sections, 2 elastic casings, and then 1 tie to tie it all together. So the pieces that are in our kit today are going to be the main body piece of our face mask, the 2 elastic casings or tie casings, 1 tie, or you may have 2 hair bands, and that's what's in your kit. Other accoutrements that are recommended are a pair of tweezers, a pair of scissors, some sewing pins, and a sewing machine. You can use a hand stitch. You can hand stitch this face mask together. Recommended using a strong back stitch, but today we're going to cover machine sewing. So the first step that we need to do is we need to put a hem on the short sides of our main body piece. So we're going to flip it over to the wrong side of the fabric. So we have the right side of the fabric, which is going to be facing out, and the wrong side of the fabric, which is going to be facing in. We're going to put a hem on either side in order to finish the edges of the pocket. So creating a hem is pretty simple. We're going to move some of these pieces out of our way. Creating a hem is pretty simple. You take your edge of the fabric, you fold it over about 1/4 of an inch, and then you fold it over once again, and then you pin that in place using a sewing pin. Now that we have finished pinning both sides of the fabric, we're going to stitch across using just a normal straight seam, and I'm going to go do that on my sewing machine, and I will be right back. Okay, we have stitched across either side of the hem, so we don't have the pins there anymore, and we can use some scissors to trim the edges of the threads, just so that we don't have to deal with that later. Okay, now that we have our hemmed edges, we're going to fold the mask piece over hamburger style, which means we're going to take both hem edges and we're going to piece them together. We're just going to kind of place them together. We're going to put wrong sides together, so that means that we've got the nice pretty side of the fabric facing out. And I'm going to go press this so that I create a nice seam along this edge so I know where the middle is. I have pressed my piece. I kind of made like a square with it, and you can see there's a nice crease down the center. This is so I know where the center line of the mask is. So now that we have this pressed, we need to create the pleats that we saw in our finished example. So the way that we do that is we're going to create pleats on both sides. We're not going to double the fabric and pleat it. We're going to create pleats on both sides of the fabric. So I take one of the sides of the fabric, kind of fold it over and fold it back, creating about a 1/2 inch pleat. And you can see that there's a difference of about 1 inch now here between the hemmed edge and the other hemmed edge. So I'm going to pin this pleat in place just through the one piece of one side of the fabric, not through both sides of the fabric. Okay, and then I'm going to repeat that. I'm going to do that one more time at a little bit higher up. So I'm going to fold it down and then fold it back up so that I've got about 1/2 inch between the 2 edges of the pleat. And again, I'm going to pin this in place. Okay. Now that I've got my first side pleated, I'm going to flip over my mask, and I'm going to do this again on the back side of the fabric. I'm going to try to line up this side's pleats with the other pleats that we did on the first side. So when I fold it over, I can line it up with the pleat that we've already previously done, and I can fold it back over with about that 1/2 inch of fabric and lining it up with the pleat that was done on the previous side. In fact, so much that I'm going to use the pin from the back side. I'm going to hold my pleat securely. I'm going to remove the pin, and I'm going to place it into the fabric all the way through. It's going to be kind of difficult, and careful you don't stab yourself. So that way we get a nice secure pleat just with the one pin. I'm going to repeat this on the other side of the fabric. I'm going to move the pin to the top of the mask, and that's so that when I'm sewing across the pins, that the pleats are in the same direction. They're pointing towards me when I'm sewing, so that the sewing machine doesn't catch the pleat and fold it in a kind of funky way. So I'm going to remove this pin altogether, holding the pleat securely. I'm going to flip it back over. I'm going to try to do this where I'm not covering it. I'm going to insert it into the pleat, through all of the layers, and then back out. Okay, so I've got a pin on the bottom side here and the top side here, and I'm going to repeat that again. Using the line of the pleat on the bottom side of the mask as my guide, and then I'm going to fold it back over, and I'm going to match up the top of the hemmed edges so that I create a nice consistent line across the top. And so again, I'm going to, on my left side, I'm going to take the pin from the bottom, I'm going to keep it on the bottom, and I'm going to go through all the layers of the fabric and back out, and repeat on the opposite side, except I'm going to bring the pin up. Okay. So now we have our fabric mask is nice and pleated, nice and properly pleated. So I'm going to go stitch across on either side, giving about a 1/4 inch seam allowance, 1/4 inch to 5/8 seam allowance as you wish. It's not an exact science. So I'm going to be right back. Now we're going to touch our casings. So in the casings, we're going to do something similar in that we're going to create hems on either side. However, because nothing is an exact science, we're going to use the mask as kind of an ideal of how we're going to get our hems sized properly. So, got a whole bunch of threads. Everybody loves threads. So the casings are going to have to go on either side of this mask, and you want the casings to be roughly the same height as your mask. So I like to line up the casing just right next to my mask so I have a really good idea of what it's going to be. And then I'm going to fold this edge over so that it lines up with the edge of the mask. So just like that. So you can see the edge lines up that edge. Maybe if my hands weren't in the way. So this edge lines up with this edge, and then I'm going to fold it over once again. Okay, and then I'm going to pin across this. Okay, and so we've got that edge pinned. Now I'm going to do the same for the opposite side. Looks like it's going to line up okay. And that's pinned. So that's going to line up. That's going to be good, I think. Okay, so now we're going to repeat on the opposite side. Now that I've got these pinned, I'm going to go hem across, or stitch across these hems rather, on my sewing machine, so I'll be right back. Now we have our 2 casings, and I'm going to trim off my threads. And now that I've trimmed off the threads, now we're going to have to get into a lot of pressing. So the goal with these casings is that we're going to create sort of a bias tape, if you've ever used a bias tape. If you haven't, we're essentially going to be folding this over hot dog style and then sort of creating a hem on the inside. So it'll create a double fold bias tape if you've ever used that. So essentially we're going to be doing it this way, but I'm going to go do it in steps, pressing between each step. So the first step that I'm going to do is I'm going to take my casings and I'm going to fold them over hot dog style. Just like that, and then I'm going to go press them. Okay, so now I have 2 casings which are pressed and they have a nice strong center seam, or center fold rather. And then we're going to take the 2 halves of our casing and we're going to fold each side in towards the center seam, or center fold, goodness gracious. So just like that, we're going to do it on that side, and we're going to do it on this other side. Then we're going to fold it in half, and then we're going to go press this very carefully. Now we have our 2 casings, and they are going to go on either side of our face mask, and we're going to pin those down. So what we are going to do is we're going to take the casing, we're going to open it. So we've got like our hot dog, and we're going to put our face mask in it. And the goal is that the casing is going to cover the seam that we did previously to solidify the pleats. So it should have no stitching showing when you've got it completely covered with the casing. So we're going to pin this in place. And if your casing is a little bit too small, you can trim the seam allowance, so you can make a cut here, being careful not to cross over the seam that you previously sewed, and that will let your casing go on a little bit farther. But I think we did a good job here, so we're going to pin both of these casings in place. So pin that one in place, we're going to pin this one in place. Now that we have these pinned in place, I'm going to go take this to the sewing machine and I'm going to sew across. Okay, so we've completed the sewing on our face mask. We're going to just trim off the threads once more. Got a lot of thread trimming. So now that we've sewn the casings on, we have pretty much a fully functional mask. So our mask has the 2 casings, it has the pleats, and then it has a pocket, which you can then put a non-woven material filter in, such as tissue. People use paper towels, some people use coffee filters. You can also use a HEMA filter, such as a vacuum cleaner bag cut to size. And that filter is typically not going to be washable, but the rest of this mask is washable. It is not necessary to put something on the inside, however, it's just a nice option to have if you want a little bit of extra protection. But this mask is going to be good for all of your needs. So next we're going to take the tie, which I have since covered in threads. And so this tie is just a piece of it is just a strip of a cotton knit fabric. It's like a jersey fabric. And so if you've ever heard of t-shirt yarn, it's essentially just a strip of a t-shirt. It's not hemmed, you'll notice. It's not going to fray a lot. It might fray a little bit. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to pull on this to make it kind of into like a rope almost. So you just pull on it. it went from like piece of fabric to like stringy, stringy, stringy. So that's just, it's just gonna help make sure that it doesn't fray. Okay, so now we're gonna insert it. Now there's a couple of different ways that you can do this. The way that I have been doing this is just like our green example, where on the bottom of the mask I have it connected. At the top of the mask I have it unconnected. This lets you tie it around the top of your head however you want. And then once you get it to a nice a way that you like it, you can tie just a simple square knot in your fabric, and then you never have to untie it because it's already got quite a bit of stretch in it. So that's just my recommendation. You can also, if you like, trim the ties so that they loop behind your ears. So, well, it's kind of hard to show on this one, but if you wanted to cut right here and create 2 knots here, you absolutely could have just your standard loops around your ears. However you want to do it, it's up to you. Your comfort is the most important thing. However, stringing this tie, we're going to take our tweezers. We are going to insert them into the casing, and you can choose whatever method you want for getting these ties in. There's nothing particular about the way that I'm doing it. I've got my tweezers all the way through. I'm going to insert my cord, my tie, into the tweezers and hold them steady, and then pull the fabric right over my tweezers, being careful to not lose the tie. If you've ever had to restring a swimsuit, you know exactly how frustrating this can be. Okay, there you go. I'm going to repeat on the opposite side, making sure that the bottom knot pocket side has got my looped end, just because that's how I prefer it. Doesn't matter how you do it. There we go. Okay. And so we can adjust these as we want, but now we have completed our face mask. Congratulations. Hope it wasn't too difficult. There are a few things about these face masks that you should know. They are, all of the materials are 100% cotton, which makes them 100% machine washable and dryable. The fabric has been pre-shrunk, so it should not shrink in the wash, but I cannot guarantee that. Additionally, this is following the CDC guidelines of tightly woven quilter's cotton. So this is as standard as you can get. This is pretty much what the CDC precisely recommends. You should always wash your hands before you start this project, and I highly, highly, highly recommend washing these masks after you have sewn this. So this is going to go straight into the washing machine. I'm probably going to tie these together first just so that it doesn't come undone. And you should wash it, machine dry it using hot water. I hope this video was informative and you're able to make your fabric mask, and thank you.